What's up, you guys? Adam here with Anabolic Climbing, and by popular demand, we're doing the steroid tier list for rock climbers. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to enlist the help of Dr. Alex Tatum, who was kind enough to make his own tier list of his steroid choices for bodybuilders. I'm going to apply this for my experience with rock climbers. By the way, guys, I do not consider this the definitive steroid tier list in rock climbing. This is just my own preferences. There are other folks in the space that have different opinions, and I highly encourage you to get their perspective on things because it's a little bit different. But these are my thoughts. If you have any differences in opinion, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, alert, and throw a comment. It helps the algorithm tremendously. Appreciate all of the new folks that found us this week. Thanks to Lattice. You guys have been awesome. I appreciate all the support. And without further ado, let's rank steroids in terms of my favorites for safety, climbing, everything else. And let's listen to Dr. Alex Tatum, who's going to explain some of these compounds at a high level. And from there on, we're going to rank them.
And generally everyone that's trying to make a name for themselves on TikTok. And so what we're going to try and do today is to have a nuanced and thorough discussion of each of these compounds. What is their history? What is their structure? How do they work? What is some interesting facts about them? What are the benefits? And then also, what are the risks? And then we're going to put all that together and then give them a grade. We're going to put them on our steroid tier list. Now, this is not your tier list. This is my tier list.
This is my tier list, Dr. Alex Tatum. Wrong. This is mine.
So if you have a strong opinion about any of these compounds, don't keep it to yourself. Shout out in the comments down below. We want to hear from you. And again,
I also want to hear from you, and Dr. Alex is right. Also, guys, don't forget to support the official release of Dr. Alex Tatum. I'm going to link his video below. I react to him a lot on this channel because, number one, medical professional. Number two, we do a lot of this, or I tend to double check a lot of his research, and he tends to be pretty spot on. Number three, he comes at it from a perspective of harm reduction, which I also share. I think this guy's great. I hang out in his Discord there too, if you ever want to find me outside of my Discord. And yeah, he's also been super supportive of letting us do reaction content. So I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate everything him and his team are doing around being a medical voice regarding anabolics. Again, don't take everything we say to the bank. This is our opinions. Please double check everything that we're saying. I'm not a doctor, but Dr. Alex is. So let's keep going.
this is not saying that one compound is necessarily stronger than the other, and that's why it gets a higher rating. This is about how effective are these compounds overall for their given indication, for their given purpose. And so, with that being said, let's go.
And by the way, when I put these in the tier list, I'm going to specify if I think that these compounds are, you know, S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, or trash tier, in the confines of either bouldering, sport climbing, big walling, things like that. So I'm going to give you guys that added context too as we go through everything.
Go ahead and let's dive into it. All right, so let's talk about the rules. Originally, I thought we could get something like a fishbowl and randomly just pull names out of a hat or something like that, and that just didn't seem right. So instead, we have an empty box of protein bars from Gorilla Mind. No, we're not sponsored by them, but if someone wants to, just hit me up because my video guy is expensive. So we are going to draw a compound.
I really need a video guy.
Out of the box of protein, and we're going to look at it, and then we're going to talk about history, biochemistry, risks, benefits, interesting facts, and put it on the tier list. So without further ado, let's get started. Our first compound, MK677.
Man, it would be diabolical if I just started pulling vials up on this video. That would be amazing. I should really consider that. I have a lot of strong opinions on MK. I actually think it was one of the first 10 videos I ever made on this channel. So me and Dr. Alex have very different opinions on MK, and you're going to find out why.
I think it's hilarious that I'm talking about all these classic anabolics, and the first thing I pick up is like the latest craze on TikTok. But I wanted to include MK677 in here because I actually really like MK for its specific application. So first off, what is MK677? Also known as ibutamorin, MK677 is a ghrelin receptor agonist, and it's actually the only one that's orally available, which means that it's available as a capsule, or sometimes you'll see it sold in like a little dropper and you put drops in your mouth because, you know, that's super scientific for dosing. And the benefit of MK677 is, in addition to boosting growth hormone, which most ghrelin receptors that are on the market, that's the whole idea. You can stimulate natural growth hormone release as opposed to dosing yourself with actual, growth itself, is that this stimulates hunger pretty significantly, but in a way that is relatively tolerable. And so what I mean by that is that if we're looking at all the different ghrelin receptor agonists, we're looking at something like ipamorelin, which has to be injected. It's a very mild appetite stimulant. Or we go to something more significant like GHRP6, which is just intense. Like you might as well have like an entire box of Oreos next to you, otherwise you're going to faint and fall out.
I have never done GHRP6, and not going to lie, that actually sounds really appealing, but absolutely dog shit for rock climbers.
This is, for most people, a compound that will stimulate hunger over a prolonged period of time in a way that's a little bit more steady, which can actually really assist with calorie consumption. And that's something that resonates with me. I've taken MK when it was prescribed to me back whenever you could actually get MK, prescribed and compounded by a legit compounding pharmacy. And, what I noticed is that for me, it made all the difference when it came to actually consuming enough calories in order to put on size, because I don't.
In general, and you're going to figure this out almost immediately, and you don't need me to tell you this, I can't think of a single rock climber that wants to do a mass phase, not seriously. At most, will eat slightly above maintenance. The idea of rock climbers needing to do a classic bodybuilder style bulk is unhinged. And, folks like kids like MK677, because you can get it online from one of the peptide sites, and they think that's super cool. But the level of growth hormone that you can upregulate is kind of negligible. You're better off just pinning growth hormone. And, driving hunger signaling just seems unreasonable for the kind of stuff that we're doing.
Care what you're doing, whether you're natural, whether you're enhanced. If you don't eat enough protein, if you don't eat enough food, you will not grow and you will not progress, because your body, it needs building blocks in order to move forward. So with all that being said, it's time to rank MK677, all right? And we have to take a couple things into consideration, right? We talked about the benefit of the growth hormone release. We've got the benefit of the appetite stimulation, right? But we also have some drawbacks, right? MK can have some significant water retention, all right? Yep. You're gonna look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man if you try to stay on this stuff too long, especially if you're running other compounds that are going to increase water retention. So you've got that drawback to worry about. And also, it doesn't last forever. You're only gonna get that appetite stimulation for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So, it's time to rank this. It doesn't have, you don't have to worry about test suppression. That's a really positive thing. Now, I would say this, honestly, if you're someone who is, let's say, a hard gainer, or you're someone where it really struggles to put on size, I got to say, like, MK677, this is S tier, man. This is.
Yeah, if you're a bodybuilder, Dr. Alex Tatum really likes MK677, but I am not a bodybuilder. I am a rock climber, and I think this compound is trash. Its only upside is it doesn't suppress endogenous testosterone production, which, like, whoop-de-fucking do. I think if you're going to be doing a lot of the enhanced stuff, you should be on TRT to begin with. But bloat, bad. Increased hunger signaling, bad. Likelihood of increasing insulin sensitivity, bad. I do not like this compound for climbers. It has no redeeming qualities, unless you want to go super hard at the Thanksgiving table, in which case I would also call that S tier, and I would think that you're super legit for doing that. But no, I've never ran MK. I will never run MK as long as rock climbing is my primary purpose.
This is a fantastic compound. Now, if you try to use MK for, I don't know, like a cut or what other terrible idea people have come up with on Reddit and TikTok, no, it's not S tier, right? But that's like trying to eat soup with a freaking fork, okay? The fork isn't the problem. You just don't know how to use an instrument. So,
by the way, what he just said there, as far as you don't know how to use a freaking instrument, is really most of the rub when it relates to anabolics and rock climbing. I think a lot of folks want to throw a square peg in a round hole and really ignore a lot of nuance and context around most compounds. A lot of compounds could potentially be leveraged in very niche situations, but the idea of just saying this is the best compound for X or Y is entirely too rudimentary of a way to look at most of these compounds.
So MK677 for putting on size, eating more calories, S tier. All right.
Trash.
So let's move on. What have we got here? All right. So this one is a fantastic favorite. Turinabol, aka T-ball. So
Turinabol, you're going to get some history on this. This is one of the one compounds that I think I would rate pretty highly that I want to run at some point that I have not yet. I don't think I've sourced it yet either. It's on my list of things to do. That's a thing that I'll do in 2026. I'll source some Turinabol. But yeah, really awesome history. Potential upside, has been used in really famous cases in performance. On paper, really interesting compound. Let's continue.
Really, really like T-ball, and it's mostly because it operates in a really, really unique space when it comes to history. So back when the Cold War was peaking and we had this huge rivalry between the United States and the Soviets, we competed in every other way except for the actual battlefield. That's why it's called the Cold War. And Olympics and competitive athletics was it. Like, all eyes were on this. Whether it was the space race, a couple of other things. And as a result, the Soviets, in a very competitive move, developed an entire doping program called the East German Doping Program that was completely centered around doping the ever-living crap out of their athletes so that they could run farther, lift more, jump higher than their American counterparts.
The Germans ran so that the North Koreans and the Chinese and the Russians could sprint. I think I've made my thoughts on on cheating in tested events pretty clear. But with that said, I also kind of admire states just saying, fuck the rules, we're going all out, this is what we do. I think that's kind of epic. If you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the movie Icarus, where it kind of ends up in the Sochi doping scandal, which I think is incredible. I'm sure you guys, if you are hardcore enough, have caught some of the weightlifting scandals and the steroid scandals from the Chinese weightlifting team. I am always intrigued when state-sponsored doping pops up. And yeah, T-ball is straight out of the East German lifting block, which is real cool.
And Turinabol was that original compound. That was the one that was used more than anything else. And what was attractive about T-ball is that it was orally available, and it really wasn't that androgenic. All right, so they were able to give it, at least in smaller doses, to their female athletes in addition to their male athletes. Another thing that's interesting about T-ball,
I don't know how many of those. I think a lot of those women ended up having some pretty gnarly virilizing effects. There are a lot. Most of the anabolics that are women safe can still absolutely virilize you because they could be DHT or testosterone derivatives, which in excess doses are, going to virilize you. That's just how that works. Women do not need excess male hormones.
is that it has really significant strength gains that are associated with it, but it doesn't have the same sort of fluid retention that you get from D-ball because it doesn't aromatize the same way. D-ball will get these weird estrogens that will come off of it, and then you end up holding onto a bunch of fluid in the subcutaneous space.
I believe it's a methylated oral or a methylated version of the Anabol. So it's just D-ball without the bloat. Definitely a thing that I need to try. It's obviously brutal on the liver because it's methylated, but I think for a 2 to 3 week period, it absolutely merits a test.
The test deca D-ball stack that everybody talks about, where you put on all this strength and size, and what you don't realize is that half of that size is just like buckets of water that you're just carrying around yourself. You can't button up your shirt. It's a super attractive look. T-ball doesn't have that, and so that is one of the greatest strengths of it. But the drawback is that like all androgens, it will suppress your natural test axis. All right, and also it's an orally available 17-alpha alkylated steroid. So this is going to play hell with your liver, like almost all oral steroids. There's nothing special about it in that regard. But it is a really fascinating compound with some fascinating history, and even today is a favorite pick for a lot of athletes, especially athletes in powerlifting and athletes in strongman who are looking to, again, add strength, all right, but they don't want to add on, that huge amount of water weight, right?
John Jones famously tested positive for Turinabol a couple times. I even think in his fight against, I think against Cormier, that's where he tested positive. So yeah, this is a super storied history in performance athletics and strongman. I don't know a lot of bodybuilders that leverage T-ball for whatever reason, but a lot of strength athletes love it. And I'm going to cautiously put this in A tier, even though it's a thing that I have not ran myself. I think for peaking for a climb, for any kind of ballistics climb like dynos or big moves, I think that this could be an unbelievable compound to leverage. At some point or another, I will try this out and I'll let you know if it belongs in A tier or S tier. I also don't think that this is a compound that I would run chronically. So this is not a compound that I would train on for extended periods of time. Personally, this is a compound that I would try to peak on. I would start using it a couple weeks in advance and then try to take it on the trip or on the set and goes that I'm going for. That's kind of the way that I imagine deploying something like this. I don't like just throwing steroids on project day at the last second without having a chance to acclimate, because I feel like that's what makes things a lot more injury prone. But yeah, I'm really interested by Turinabol. All the science is super good. The fact that I haven't done a deep dive on this is kind of like me slacking. I need to get after this.
Brian Shaw, fantastically handsome guy, but not everybody wants to look like they're a tomato about to pop. So we're going to go ahead and for T-ball, I feel pretty confident putting this right in A tier of oral steroids. And
yeah, me and Dr. Alex agree. Most bodybuilders will give you pretty dog shit advice when you say that you're a climber looking to get into gear. A lot of them have recommended that I try Turinabol, and I think they're spot on with that. This is one of the rare times where I think the bro lifters are pretty spot on.
Moving on. All right. So next we've got Equipoise. Whoa, Nelly. So Equipoise is an interesting compound because it is more anabolic than testosterone, but it is not quite as anabolic as, let's say, a 19-nor. So, for example, like nandrolone or trestolone or tren. Equipoise kind of sits in this space where it is commonly used to try and add on more size onto an athlete over a longer period of time. Think more dry gains, okay, that are going to be not quite as dry. You're not going for that shredded look of Primobolan. This is something that you're going to run whenever you are in more of a bulking phase, but it's something that can be added into in addition to testosterone to try and add both strength and size on somebody in a very more reasonable fashion. At least that is.
So he's right. It's definitely more common to see equipoise on a bulk versus a cut. I don't really think that primobolan is inherently a thing that folks would use to diet down specifically. But yeah, these are more drier compounds. Equipoise is formulated off of testosterone. But what's really interesting about it is even though it might not be quite as potent as the 19-nors, which would be your trenbolone, your deca, or nandrolone, it's actually estrogen suppressive. So folks tend to use it paired with testosterone to manage the excess estrogen. But blood work is really required when running something like an equipoise because there is no cookie cutter dose for this. I know some folks that it doesn't really suppress their estrogen a whole bunch and they could really run tons and tons of EQ as bodybuilders. And then there are some folks that they run, 100 milligrams of EQ and they're just completely shut down with their estrogen. And that's kind of associated with the anxiety that some folks report from running equipoise. I have a friend who I love to death that's a total dumbass that ran an EQ only cycle. Don't do that for very obvious reasons. But I do think equipoise potentially has a place. It really drives up red blood cell count. It's pretty darn anabolic. I have heard of a coach that helped a dude climb Everest by ramping his hematocrit with EQ so that he could have a better time up at altitude, which I thought was super interesting. I think it's applicable for big wall or for alpinism. I think it's applicable for folks that are doing a lot of ballistic climbs. You're really likely to find it right now. There's a huge shortage in Masteron and Primobolan, so a lot of folks are using equipoise to manage their estradiol. So it's a compound you'll definitely see in the underground right now. It's a thing that can definitely help you put on some size and strength. It's a thing I'm going to be testing later this year. I am curious to see where Dr. Alex rates it, but I think it absolutely has some applicability for ballistic climbing and alpinism.
Is the reputation. One thing I really like about equipoise is because we always talk about how bodybuilders are injecting themselves with horse steroids, and that comes from this. This is the horse steroid that was originally developed for racing horses that you can now find at your local gym.
Shout out to Seabiscuit.
Maybe not your local gym, maybe just my local gym. But
my local gym.
Certainly you can find it in the locker of every single TikTok influencer trying to sell you watered down peptides. So equipoise, a solid anabolic choice, has the drawbacks of EQ anxiety, where people will get extremely stressed and very anxious in their own heads while running equipoise, especially for a longer period of time. And I will tell you that equipoise will raise your hematocrit faster than almost any other compound, in addition to raising your blood pressure. And so I think that it does have some drawbacks. And again, while it is a little bit more anabolic than just pure testosterone, it also has some drawbacks associated with that. So I'm going to give equipoise a solid B tier.
I largely agree with this. I was trying to decide if I wanted to put this in A tier or B tier, and the reason I'm going to throw it in B tier is just you need to manage the side effects with EQ a lot more than you would with something like a Masteron or a Primobolan that's just more benign. Absolutely has its place. Super effective compound for driving strength and staying dry and for managing estradiol. I think in a pinch, it's absolutely worth running if for whatever reason you can't track down an AI or Primo or Mast. But yeah, I think EQ is a really solid compound that I'm probably going to run during one of my strength off seasons.
Will it make you run faster?
God, I wish. I only run if somebody chases me, Ronick.
True.
Oh, snap. We're talking Superdraw. Superdraw is wild, okay? This is essentially oral primobolan that, after being 17 alpha alkylated, becomes stupid potent and is one of the most powerful yet hepatotoxic compounds that's ever been invented. And you could...
Some of the wildest blood work you'll ever see is guys running Superdraw.
Buy it at GNC. This was originally developed, I believe it was back in the 40s, and it was then consigned to the depths of history as just another interesting compound.
By the way, I was lifting in the early 2000s, and I was going to GNC a lot. I was dumb, man. I should have picked up Superdraw when it was still available over the counter. What was I doing? Mistakes were made.
It was invented and never really found a place in the commercial marketplace, but then was rediscovered and introduced as a freaking supplement and sold to high schoolers alongside creatine back in the early 2000s. So one of the interesting benefits of Superdraw is that it can add a lot of size.
Huge mistake of me not running this back in the day. What was I thinking? I still remembered seeing ads for this in like Muscle Mag and stuff like that.
In a relatively short period of time, and generally yields a very dry or grainy look compared to some other compounds, again harkening back to its roots as basically oral primobolan. But the problem with Superdrol is that it is so freaking hepatotoxic that there have been multiple case reports of guys actually going into liver failure. So, not just turning, yellow or getting yellow eyes, but, full on hepatic fulminant liver failure, needing to go on a liver transplant list. Like, this stuff will kill you if you are not careful. So I think that as epic as its history is, being a compound that you could buy at GNC in the early 2000s, I just have to say, because of the risk, Superdrol, this is a C. I would almost say, actually, yeah, it's a C tier compound. All right, this is.
If you were really interested in going full clip for ballistic climbing or driving absolutely brutal strength in an off season, you could try to justify this to yourself. This is just one of those tools where, even though it's incredibly potent, I personally speaking, and I kind of agree with Dr. Alex here, the downside does not justify the upside. If you want to do pretty sizable liver damage in a matter of weeks, then yeah, Superdrol is probably for you. I think it's a dry enough compound to potentially be viable. I just think that there are other tools that can get me personally 90% of the way there in terms of acute strength gains without the downside. So, for example, it's way more hepatotoxic than turinabol, and is the strength between the two that sizable that it justifies the risk? And in my mind, the answer is probably no. I'm going to throw this in C tier, not because it's not effective. I just personally find that I'm not willing to risk that. Maybe you're younger and more bold and it would be higher up on your list. That's entirely possible. I know a lot of dudes that swear by Superdrol. I'm just not one of them.
Is not something that I can imagine fitting into almost any modern cycle, because there are so many other safer options to get to that same final look, although it may take a little bit more time. All right, next on the list, we've got, oh baby, nandrolone decanoate. So nandrolone decanoate, aka decadurabolin, was actually not the first form of nandrolone to hit the market. First form was nandrolone phenylpropionate, but nandrolone decanoate became the favorite simply because it is a longer ester, and so it could be dosed less frequently.
I've never done deca directly, but I have done NPP, so basically the same compound on a shorter acting ester. I had a lot of water retention with NPP, which is even lighter on it than deca. Obviously, so Dr. Alex has written a paper on deca. I have not. I have read his paper on deca, though. It's really interesting. I'm going to have to close Discord. Yeah, deca is an OG classic bodybuilding compound. I don't necessarily love it for rock climbers. I want him to highlight his points, and then I'll share more of mine.
The original indication for nandrolone, because it was on the market as a medication, was for anemia. And so for patients that have certain medical conditions, in particular chronic kidney disease or end-stage renal disease where they're actually on dialysis, your kidneys are responsible for more than just filtering your blood. They're actually responsible for making the compound erythropoietin that stimulates your bone marrow to make more red blood cells. And so whenever that's taken out of the equation, many of those patients will become anemic and they have really low blood counts. And so obviously we know that you can dose testosterone at high levels and end up getting a response when it comes to your red blood cells, but they couldn't dose female patients with that. And even if you dose male patients with that, you've got all those nasty, weird androgenic sides. So nandrolone was developed as the prototypical 19-nor derivative of testosterone. And so it had all of these erythropoietic effects. Nandrolone doesn't have many of those androgenic side effects because nandrolone does not convert via 5-alpha reductase to a very potent DHT compound.
So yeah, this is most of the anabolics that were developed were either there to treat sarcopenia or anemia, things of that nature. And I do think that we're going to see a anabolic resurgence now that GLP-1s are ubiquitous and basically everywhere. I think hundreds of millions of people have ran GLP-1s at this point. Over 12% of Americans have ran GLP-1s. So as muscle wasting becomes a bigger and bigger issue, I definitely think that we are going to see an uptick in anabolic research, which is cool. With that said, though, 19 NORs are pretty brutal for a whole number of reasons. Number one, changes in sexual preferences. By the way, this is not guaranteed, but because some of these like nandrolone will play with prolactin, that's definitely a thing that can happen. There are folks that tend to enjoy some thicker ladies, which, no judgment, but that's a thing. There's sort of a deca depression that can happen along with anxiety. So, not everyone tolerates 19-nors super well, especially as they get older. But personally, I just think they're too anabolic for rock climbing. I think you're going to put on way more tissue on nandrolone than you would on an equipoise, than you would on a testosterone, a masteron, a primobolan. And for that, I'm not super into it. Also, it does drive collagen synthesis. I mentioned this in the lattice video, but it over deposits the collagen. So what ends up happening is you have a stiffer, thicker tendon, but it's more brittle. You can undo that with additional exercise over time. It just has so many drawbacks, and it's just not the best tool for the job. In the event that I was a bodybuilder and I was trying to get huge, I would absolutely slam DECA or NPP and use that as an anabolic and use that as the classic trio of a test base, a 19-nor, and a DHT. But in the context of rock climbers, I just don't think it's viable.
It does go through that pathway, but the ultimate product, doesn't serve to be a really strong ligand for the DHT receptor. So as a result, you really don't get a lot of that hair loss and, the more, androgenic side effects that are typically associated with steroids.
So that's actually true. It does seem to be a pretty hair-safe compound if that's the thing that you're worried about. There are folks that run nandrolone-only cycles. But again, 19-nors are super neurotoxic. I think of all the branches between testosterone, DHTs, and 19-nors, 19-nors are far and away the most neurotoxic. And you do have androgen receptors in your amygdala, and you will have brain remodeling. I think the Anabolic Roundtable just did a thing on the neurotoxicity of steroids. And if tren is the worst offender, nandrolone is number 2.
So that's why it was invented. Now, from a performance enhancement standpoint, nandrolone has been estimated to be 20 times more myogenic than testosterone if you look at those old assay studies, in rats. And, again, how much does that really mean? But if you talk to anyone who has compared a cycle of just testosterone to nandrolone, if they're a responder to it, this stuff hits like a freight train. It is pretty darn potent. The drawback is, though, is that because it is not very androgenic, it's more myogenic. If you are running a pure nandrolone cycle or a nandrolone dominant cycle, it becomes really likely that you could develop sexual dysfunction, also known as decadic. This is a real phenomenon where essentially you've got this compound we hypothesize, binding to your testosterone receptor, to the androgen receptor, and it's just not simulating any androgenicity like down in the corpus cavernosum, and so you're not getting any nitric oxide release that you need in order to dilate that penile artery and engorge the corpora and get an erection. So it's become very common to run testosterone as a base with nandrolone,
and you need some sort of driver of estrogen to really make the nandrolone work properly. I have heard of folks basically just running nandrolone only cycles with estrogen and using that to drive the nandrolone. That's not a thing I'm trying to do, but it's a thing that could work. All in all, though, I don't think it's a great compound for rock climbers. I think for bodybuilders, it's probably an A-tier compound. I know that Dr. Alex loves it. I am just not super, super impressed with it for the stuff that I'm trying to accomplish. And I really wanted it to. I have spent probably 20 to 30 hours researching the nandrolone, reaching out to experts, wanting to make this thing work, and just isn't for me. One of the other guys that I know that really likes nandrolone, who's also a climber, said he ended up getting too big on it too. So maybe your experience will be different. It's not a thing I'm probably going to run again as long as climbing is my main focus.
Something that's become, almost kind of bog standard in most TRT clinics that prescribe nandrolone, because, many do, is to do like that standard, half a dose of nandrolone per testosterone. So if you're on 200 mgs of testosterone, you'll do 100 mgs of DECA. But in reality, patients may be able to tolerate a different ratio than that. But, you just have to, it's different for every single patient. There's not like one hard set thing. And one thing that I particularly love about nandrolone is this was the first compound that I wrote a research paper on. So I wrote, I believe even still to date, the first and only paper talking about the effect of nandrolone on joint pain, because that's something that's been seen for a long time. Guys get on DECA and they say that it helps with their joints and helps joint soreness. So we did a retrospective.
By the way, I've tried this and I did not get any improvement in my joints. I wish it did. I would love for that to be a thing, but that's just not my experience. So, it'd be like that sometimes.
Study on that when I was in fellowship, and I am still super proud of that. So just because I published on it, for that reason alone, nandrolone decanoate DECA is S tier. All right, next on the list, nandrolone phenylpropionate.
I'm going to call it C tier.
aka NPP. NPP, this is a fascinating compound. It was the first form of nandrolone to come out, as we had mentioned earlier, and it has a shorter half-life, which means that you have to inject more frequently, but the benefit is that you don't have to worry about fluid retention as much. And that's essentially the only thing that really distinguishes nandrolone phenylpropionate from decanoate. It's just a different sized ester, so I don't think we have to spend too much time on this one, but objectively, this is going to give you a much drier look. You're going to not put on as much fluid, which is nice if you're stacking this with other compounds. Like the old school test Deca D-ball in reality is probably much better as, like, I don't know, test NPP and T-ball. That would probably be a much drier and more tolerable version of that.
So yeah, we're just going to skip through this. I would probably put NPP a little bit ahead of Deca if you're worried about water retention, a little bit behind it if you're okay with that, but you want to drive more joint or better joint feelings. I don't like the 19 millers. I don't think that they really have a place in a rock climber's arsenal, to be honest. And I'm going to skip it.
Next one, Winstrol, aka Winnie. I love Winstrol because it is one of the most OG oral steroids that came out of the East German bloc during the years of the Cold War, and it is extremely potent. And I also think that for a long time, this was the most popular steroid for high schoolers to try and hide from their moms, whenever they were going out for football or something, because it's very easy to take, it's orally available, so it's easy to hide your stash from your parents, and it gives this very dry, strong type of vascular look. And
I do think cosmetically, Winstrol is probably one of the goated orals.
Addition to some pretty significant strength gains. The drawback with Winstrol is that it is really, really hard on your liver, but it's especially hard on your lipids. And so guys who will run Winstrol, if they're not being careful, they can often run it for way too long. And what happens is they tank their HDL, their LDL goes up, and you talk about having young guys, not bodybuilders, that's a totally different ballgame. Those doses are just banana cakes. But if you hear about young recreational steroid users that are dropping from cardiac events, not uncommonly Winstrol's played a significant portion in that, because this is going to be what drives.
Yeah, we could talk about the issues with dyslipidemia. That's not really why I have an issue with Winstrol. So again, we're going to go back to Reza, and he famously, Reza Colossian, the Iranian climber, he popped for Winstrol. And by the way, his placings were atrocious when he ran it. Winstrol is incredible for driving strength acutely. It's got a amazing cosmetic look. But the issue is it does increase collagen synthesis. All of these things are too. But the real issue is it upregulates type 3 collagen synthesis and downregulates type 1. So you tend to have, A, weaker lattice structures within the tendon. Number 2, your tendons and joints tend to dry out. So you become way more brittle on Winstrol. So you are super strong and super brittle at the same time, which is a recipe for disaster. Dorian Yates famously tore, I think, biceps and triceps running Winnie pre-contest. I don't have any hard data to say that more folks get injured on Winnie than any other steroid, but if you put a gun to my head and asked me to bet, that would probably be the one that I would assume. I think that Winnie is probably one of the more injury-prone compounds of all of the ones available. So while I know folks run it, and I think it could easily be run 2 to 3 weeks prior to a project with great results. I know a guy that loves to do that. It's a hard pass for me, man. I'm going to throw it in B tier because it could be useful, but it's probably not a compound I'm going to run. And I'm going to put it low B tier right above C.
Plaque formation in a large portion of men. And so I really like Winstrol. I think it's effective at what it does, but the problem is that it does terrible things to your lipids. And also, it really dries out the joints. It kind of feels like you're lifting with sandpaper. And
does that seem like a thing that you're trying to climb on with joints like sandpaper? That sounds terrible. By the way, Chris D'Elia famously talked about as a teenager doing Winstrol for 2 years straight, Jesus, and getting brain zaps. I don't know if that's because of the Winstrol, but man, running an oral for 2 years is crazy work. Especially not without a testosterone base. That's insane.
Somebody who is rapidly approaching 40 and had my 38th birthday last week. I feel
happy birthday, Dr. Alex.
Old enough as is. I don't really need anything else reminding me that every day I'm one step closer to death. And so for that, we're going to put Winstrol in solid B tier for now.
Man, me and Dr. Alex agreeing all over the place.
All right, moving on. Ron, I don't even think we're halfway through this. We have so many more compounds to cover. I think we went a little bonkers on this one. Oh, wow. This is a way to go. MENT. When you want to go to the dark side of DECA, MENT is your man. So
I've never ran Ment. I know some people seem to like it. I think this is almost certainly going to be a trash tier compound, but Yeah, let's learn more about Ment together because this is an education channel.
What is MENT? What is mint? So mint, also known as trestolone, is essentially the altered juiced version of DECA. So what happens when you get DECA on steroids? Well, you get MENT. MENT is a little weird in that it is a 7-alpha methyl version of nandrolone, which was originally developed not for any sort of anabolic purposes. This was developed as a potential agent for male contraception. So this kind of
Oh yeah, so I'm almost positive this thing definitely is like a gyno machine. I don't know if this upregulates progesterone too, because I guess it's like a 17 alkylate and 19 nor. That's crazy.
sex with another part of my practice, which is male fertility. The honest to goodness truth is that we don't really have any good hormonal agents for controlling fertility in males. We don't have an oral male contraceptive. We don't have an injectable male contraceptive. Honestly, if you're a guy and you're trying to not knock anybody up, you're stuck with either physical barriers, so just wrapping it with a condom, or you're looking at a vasectomy, which, it's great. I do vasectomies, and even better than that, I do vasectomy reversals. So, all you guys who are on your 3rd and 4th wives, holler at your boy. But
no, still happily married on my first wife. And yeah, there is no male contraception. I know, folks, that your fertility parameters will be dampened on anabolics, but you're still fertile, my boy. So please, you can still knock that gal up. So keep that in mind.
We don't really have anything that is like an on-off switch. We've tried to develop a couple different things. There's some products on the market or coming to market potentially as like a gel that could be injected into the vas deferens and then maybe dissolved later. But again, nothing that you can get really today. So this was a valiant effort, and not just because the intent was in the right place, but because we got a really ridiculously overpowered steroid as a result. And so MENT hits like a freight train. It is much more myogenic than either DECA or NPP, and it's probably on the level of Tren, although it is much more watery than Tren.
That's just what you want. A 19 nor with more water retention. Amazing. Let's go.
It's a compound that you don't see used very commonly in bodybuilding circles, simply because there are other compounds that are much more mild and tolerable that guys can use instead. But this is something that I've absolutely seen powerlifters use to great effect, especially when they're already at the top of their weight class and they don't really care anymore. So MENT is a fascinating compound, but because it does have pretty significant sides, this is not something for general consumption. Not that any freaking steroid is for general consumption, let's be honest. But I'm going to have to put MENT as a solid B tier right now.
Yeah, too anabolic. I assume the mental side effects of any 19 nor are unhinged. I'm throwing that in the trash. If you are ultimately trying to become the greatest bloat lord climbing has ever created, please, for the love of God, don't do this, but I want to see what this would look like. I would love someone to do a strongman style stack and just get water maxed to just go full Michelin man and just start sending V17. That would be so cool to me. Obviously, it's not going to happen. The mechanics of that don't work. But yeah, that would just be, for nothing other than parody, I think that would be incredible.
Now, B tier. All right, let's keep going here. We're going to shake things up a bit. Next one. Oh, geez. Proviron. I don't know what to do with you, Proviron. This is a compound that I have never seen anybody run on their own. I've never seen anybody run in a small stack. This is always just some additional thing that seems to be added in when someone is already running 3 to 4 grams of a bunch of other compounds and they're going into a show. And I don't.
Yeah, this is true. The only folks I hear running Proviron are bodybuilders getting into a contest, and I don't really know what it does other than drain your wallet. A lot of the coaches that I talk to rag on this thing for pretty obvious reasons. If you don't know what a compound is really giving, by the way, it's entirely possible that it's the perfect compound for rock climbers and it's just mild enough and perfect enough. So, maybe I'll do some actual research on this. But if Dr. Alex doesn't like it and most of the other folks in the circles that I run in aren't big fans, I'll research on it in the event that the bro science is wrong, but I'm not super hyped on this thing.
Don't know if this is actually providing any sort of benefit at that point. This is an extremely weakly anabolic compound. It's weaker than testosterone. It's primarily just used as a way to offset many of the side effects that can happen when you're running really large complex stacks with other compounds. But I just have no patience for it. I really don't. It is a supporting character at best. And listen, we don't mess with supporting characters around here. All right, we're all stars. All right, S tier only. So I would say Proviron. This is F tier, straight F tier. This is.
I'm going to call it, or I'm going to take his word for it. Don't take this to the bank. I'll do some additional research because mild anabolics are kind of interesting at face value. So I'll take a look at that. But no one has ever given me a compelling case to run this compound, so I'm just going to leave it there. If you have experience running Proviron, please tell me. I don't know anyone that's run it and come away better for it.
This is trash, man. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put this over here, and you know what? We will never worry about it ever again. All right. All right, moving on. All right, next on the list, we've got testosterone cypionate, the OG steroid. Interesting story. When I went through my fellowship training, so when you go through training as a doctor, you do residency, which is going to be just your baseline, whatever your specialty is going to be. And then if you happen to be a particular masochist, you can go on for further subspecialty training called fellowship, which is what I did. And so after 5 years of urology training, I went all the way down to Houston, Texas to do my fellowship with a guy named Dr. Larry Lipschultz. And Dr. Lipschultz is really the godfather of modern men's health. If you look,
shout out to Dr. Lipschultz. That's awesome. I'm going to listen to his explanation, but testosterone is S tier. It is the base of basically any anabolic cycle. Whether you're running test in a TRT context at 140, 150 milligrams, or running it and ramping it more super physiologically, I think that it's just the gold standard for climbers. In the event that you get above roughly 300 milligrams, I do think that it's potentially damaging to collagen synthesis and to tendon health. But I think that it's largely protective to fingers below that dose. I've made the case that running 300 milligrams of androgens or less is great for the muscles in your fingers and helps protect the strength of that or of those muscles even when you have time away from the wall, which is dope. Being able to hold on to muscle in deep calorically restrictive states is incredible. Right now, I'm on a deep cut with a GLP-1 where I'm running around 1,600 calories a day, and I don't really have to worry about losing muscle because I get my hormones from a vial, and the hormone I get from a vial right now is testosterone and anthate, but there's cypionate in the house, and yeah, test cyp is great, anthate is great, prop is great, test is great, it's an S-tier compound, it's bioidentical. Yeah, the only thing I'll say about testosterone is if you run it too high of a dose, your estrogen is the thing that you need to control, either with an aromatase inhibitor or a DHT like a primobolan or a mastron, or maybe a equipoise, which isn't a DHT, but you get the point. As long as you are able to control your estrogen, testosterone is muscle protective, neuroprotective, awesome for mood and resilience. Testosterone's fucking gangster. I love testosterone. So yeah, it's an S tier, but I do want to give Dr. Alex his flowers and let him honor the folks that helped him out in the field.
Look at the field of male fertility. He pretty much invented that. If you look at how we perform vasectomy reversals, if you look at some of the most seminal publications on things like testosterone in patients that have prostate cancer, on how to regain fertility in men that have been exposed to testosterone, really characterizing how these compounds work with human physiology. I mean, Larry was on the cutting edge, and he's still in practice today. I won't tell you how old he is because it's a forever mystery of which I am sworn to secrecy. But he still sees, I kid you not, 70-something patients a day, and it is absolutely wild. So when finishing our fellowship, me and my co-fellow for life, Dr. John Balin, shout out to John down in Clearwater, Florida.
By the way, shout out to Dr. Lipschultz, was that his name? And to Dr. Alex for giving us the history of male fertility and early TRT. Guys like this, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? This channel would not be possible without folks like Dr. Alex and his cohort doing research like this, with guys like Coach Colton, Dean St. Mart, Vigorous Steve, Kurt Havens, guys that are in the weeds, doing research, doing tests on themselves, and getting some of this stuff through clinical trials so that guys like myself can experiment. I will always have endless respect and appreciation for guys like this. And the fact that Dr. Alex is dope enough to let me react to this, please subscribe to Dr. Alex Tatum. You absolutely should. He has so many videos on various anabolics and SARMs, and him and I both share the goal of driving safety and harm reduction in these compounds. Guy's amazing. Please check him out. Thank you again, Dr. Alex.
We wanted to find a gift for Larry that was like nothing else. That was something truly unique. And what we found is the first book written on testosterone for mass consumption was called The Male Hormone. It was published in 1945 by an author known as Paul de Cruif. And this was wild because he talked about the potential muscle and strength benefits of testosterone. This is in 1945. At that point, they were still isolating testosterone from bull testicles.
True.
Injectable testosterone, that didn't come out to the 50s. And this guy had already picked up on the potential anabolic metabolic effects of testosterone, literally just maybe 10 something years after it had first been isolated. So that was really cool. We found a first edition copy of that book, put it in a nice little frame, and put it up in Larry's office. And that was one of the coolest things, I think. So proud.
Shout out to Dr. Alex. What a homie. I know I'm taking like a couple minutes to glaze him. That's not just for runtime. That's just, it's great to get to know these guys and know a little bit more about their story. I think that's awesome.
That's still up in his office today. So testosterone cypionate, first injectable form of testosterone, first form of testosterone that was introduced to the market as a medication. This is the building block off of everything else. This is what everything else is built upon, and this is the standard, right? Test cypionate. So test cypionate for that reason, and we'll throw test enanthate in there as well because they're pretty similar. This is going to have to end up being another S tier for me. S tier testosterone cypionate. So now we've got, oh dear God, tren. So before tren.
Ooh boy, time for tren, the mythical compound. I'm going to take my time on this one. Not because it's effective for rock climbers, but because there's just too many stories to tell about tren.
Became a meme. Tren was actually a bull steroid, and it was
still is, by the way.
Something that was in most markets never meant for human consumption. Tren was a derivative of nandrolone. It was a 19-nor derivative that was originally meant for bulls, and it was briefly marketed as a potential treatment option for women with hormone-sensitive breast cancer in France.
It was France. He's absolutely right on that. By the way, I think they were dosing them around 75 to 150 milligrams a week, which is psychotic work, man. I could not imagine being a gal doing 75 to 150. I think it was like 150 milligrams every 2 weeks was the dosing protocol.
In the 1970s, I believe. Roddick, you can check me on that. But we've never seen a pharma-grade trenbolone in the United States. And like this used to be like the secret of the bodybuilding world. This is something that was never really talked about in the open. Steroids really weren't talked about openly until maybe the past 20 years. Which if you look at the entire history of bodybuilding, that's relatively recently. And tren certainly was this very kind of taboo compound. But now it's become a meme, right? There are people who their entire personality is built around tren, and they've never freaking taken it. And the reason why is because there is nothing quite like tren. Tren hits harder than almost any other injectable compound. It's incredibly potent. It gives incredible aggression. It gives an incredible amount of strength, an incredible amount of size, and it gives this kind of dry, grainy look that is really useful for competitors that really haven't developed that sort of muscle maturity that.
Think Wolverine, or I think Hugh Jackman in the Wolverine movie where he's just coming out of the water, got those claws, doing the Yeah, I remember the first time I saw that as a kid, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this dude's an animal. Fun story. I worked Comic-Con the year that movie came out. I was working in 3D printing at the time. And I was walking around, and I hadn't worked out. I had gotten kind of skinny. Basically what was happening was I was traveling all the time for work. I was like on the road 50% of the time for the year. I was miserable. And I'm at Comic-Con, and I see this dude that just looks like a freight train. He's just big as a house, and he looks like Wolverine. And there's just a level of sadness and depression that I had because I'm thinking, who is this guy that's just cosplaying for fun, that is nailing the look, that's just incredibly jacked, and like, what am I doing? Like, how can this guy pull it off and I can't? And as I'm sad, I upload this photo to Facebook at the time. And my friends were like, hey, Hugh Jackman was walking around Comic-Con all day dressed as Wolverine. I think you saw Hugh Jackman. And a huge wave of relief crashed over me. Because if Hugh Jackman looks like that, he's supposed to, thank God. But if just some casual was looking that crazy, I don't even know what I could do looking that good in your spare time. That dude looked incredible. Like a total house, man. I did not realize guys could look that big. And I had been to bodybuilding shows by that point. He was just so tall and so massive. Like, he was fucking huge. So, yeah, tren is definitely super potent. Let's backtrack from the glazing of Hugh Jackman and the personal story. Dr. Alex got me going. And let's be real about tren, right? It does drive aggression. As far as I know, it's the most neurotoxic steroid they still give tren to cattle to this day. Of folks consuming water by tren cows, their IQ is on average 10 points lower. The sexual changes and deviancy in tren is notable. There are folks that are heterosexual that, because of the progestogenic effects, start either getting into some tren porn or just going or being in the dudes. And God bless, you live your truth. We don't judge on this channel. We don't kink shame. But it is a thing that is unique to 19 Norse. So apart from the neurotoxicity, changes in sexual preferences, hard to sleep, you get trend sweats. I have friends that, sweat through the covers, insomnia, paranoia, a feeling of vigilance. A lot of folks think that their partners are cheating on them. A buddy of mine wanted to fire his entire staff when he was running a bunch of trend. Oof. It's a burly compound, man. I can't think of any other compound that is more mythologized, that is just more brutal. It's so for tren, I want to say tren enanthate, I couldn't justify running tren long term. It's entirely too anabolic, entirely too neurotoxic. I'm just going to say this right now. Tren is not a compound for climbers. There's one way you could run tren. Don't do this. But the only context for running tren is running tren acetate, which is fast clearing tren, for a couple of days prior to a highly ballistic climb to drive aggression. I wouldn't want to run it for any longer than a couple days because it'll fuck up your sleep. Also, the mental side effects are brutal. I do not think I will ever run this compound. But if someone was dead set on running it, that's the only context I could consider where tren would make any sort of sense. I don't like this compound for climbers. Just because I'm giving you the nichest of niche case, I would still rather run Anavar or Turinabol in its place. This is just not a compound that I want to justify. And by the way, this is a compound that was used famously in the Sochi Olympics. It was part of the Duchess cocktail. Still, I could show its efficacy and performance, right? Obviously, when taken, as I'm describing, right, prior to performance on the day, it produced, I think, 14 or 16 Olympic gold medals. It has a place. It's a bear, man. It's a super, super potent compound.
Comes from being on stage for many, many years and having what some judges will describe as old muscle. The drawback about tren, though, is just everything else. Everything else is a dumpster fire. This is an absolute poison. This is toxic. I mean, honestly, people are getting excited about microplastics and shit, and then they're injecting this. Yeah, okay.
Nothing is funnier to me than bodybuilders being afraid of vaccines and pinning research chemicals. It's the funniest shit in the world to me. And by the way, don't take my word for all of the side effects about tren. Listen to Dr. Alex, man. Listen to the medical professional. He's going to tell you the same shit I am.
Okay. Tren is one of the few injectables that has actually been linked with nephrotoxicity. So most injectable steroids actually don't hurt your kidneys. We can get into that debate, more later. It is, interestingly enough, hepatotoxic, despite being injectable. It causes amyloid plaques in the brain that have been linked to Alzheimer's. If you can think of a way that tren can poison you, tren can poison you. And so this is, the compound that Sebum mentioned that he just wouldn't take later on in his career, although it bears saying that he definitely took it earlier in his career, and it may have been influential in building his physique that he then relied on, right? Because honestly, if you do a couple cycles with tren, you're going to put an incredible amount of muscle on that a lot of people are going to try to rely on for the rest of their careers. But the problem is it worth it? Is it really worth gambling with?
Definitely not for rock climbers. I think that it's just entirely too brutal of a compound to justify running to anyone in my age demographic. I think you put on entirely too much mass to run it for an extended period of time. I think it could be used in a fringe case or a niche case, but I don't think it's the best tool for that job. I am going to... I don't want to call this A tier. I'm going to call this high B. Not because I don't think... In this one case, No, I can't. Just on principle, I don't want people to do tren. I'm going to call this high B. Yeah, that's the only instance where I could justify running tren. Don't run tren. It's absolutely not worth it. I can't justify it.
Your health to this degree. And the truth is that I don't think so. I mean, I love playing, mad scientist with my own body chemistry as much as anybody, but
same.
Honestly, I kind of like my kids, and I kind of like life. And so for me, tren, yeah, it's a cult classic at this point. It's a meme. It's incredibly potent, but
if you want to fuck up your life in a relationship, tren might be the most S tier compound that was on this list.
This is straight F tier. This is trash. This is not something that anybody should ever put into their body.
You know what? Fuck it. Dr. Alex said it and I agree. Just because I could create one fringe case where I could justify using this for a 24 or 48 hour period doesn't mean that it's worth the risks or potentially wanting to run this long term. You can't really develop a taste for something you haven't tried. I'm going to put this in F tier, and I appreciate Dr. Alex sort of calling me out on that. Good work.
It doesn't make sense. There are other options that take more time that have significantly less risk. Trend, it's an F. I'm sorry.
By the way, going with Tren back to back with Halo is crazy work. We're just hitting on all of the stuff that make you unhinged.
Bro. I never thought it would be such tiresome and thirsty work ranking steroids, Ronick. All right, let's see what we've got. We have got Halo testing. I don't know, I think we finally released our short on halotestin today, Ronick, but halotestin is a really fascinating compound in that it really does nothing for hypertrophy. You are not going to get bigger on halotestin. Your head might get bigger, and you might think that you're tougher and stronger than you actually are until you end up picking a fight with your local powerlifter over who gets the squat rack and turns you into a pancake. But halotestin really primarily is a compound that's used for its aggression. Some people do like the physique effects that it can have. It's been known to kind of contribute more to muscle hardness and kind of a grainy look, but again, there are other options for that, here. And, really, Halo, if they talk about roid rage, if that really is a thing, halotestin is, the absolute worst offender. So I think Halo is an interesting compound, but as far as usefulness, I mean, not really. Halo, this is C tier for me.
So Halo is a thing that I am entirely too nervous to try. I found a way to source it, haven't gotten around to testing it. Halo is also it's a testosterone derivative. I had a really good conversation about Halo. I was picking Dr. Todd's brain about Halo, and he said, look, man, Halo is one of those things where I take it for a week and I want to fight my best friend who I love to death. And I am terrified of the anger that is associated with Halo. The issue isn't just the half-life, it's how long the metabolites stay in your system. So again, there is a case to run Halo for the last 2 weeks prior to just drive aggression. I think it's probably the number one preferred anabolic of arm wrestlers. I think most arm wrestlers really love their Halo and their Tren. Just anecdotally speaking from what I've heard from Leo Longevity and some other folks around the scene. Rest in peace, Leo. Halo would, again, have a place for ballistic climbs, but oof, it's a lot of mental side effects to deal with. Fun fact, there was a president that was running Halo before TRT was invented, and that was JFK. During the missile crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis, he was running Halo. Imagine being on Halo, barbiturates, and whatever else was in that guy's system and having to not cause nuclear Armageddon. You run that scenario 1,000 times, and there's a lot of times where the world blows up. It's real lucky that didn't go sideways. Jesus Christ. I don't remember what I put this on the original tier list. I'm going to throw it in B because it has a place for peaking, but I don't know why I would put it above other compounds. I could even justify it in like high C.
This is C tier. Ronick, we're running out of room. Okay, we have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm fine with high C. I think that's fine. I don't like... So I know that I'm sort of categorizing this in terms of like things that I would peak with and things that I would train on. I don't even think I have any compounds right now that I would train on specifically prior than just testosterone. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I actually need to throw this in high C tier.
Much beer here. All right. Oh man, this is one of the goats. Oxandrolone, Anavar, baby. Anavar is probably the most preem oral anabolic agent there is.
True. Easily my number one favorite oral. If you guys remember last year, I ran Anavar for 9 months straight and I still didn't have HDL in the rough side of the reference range. It was at the absolute low of normal, but I didn't crash my HDL after 9 months. I fucking love this drug.
It is actually not very hepatotoxic at all. It will screw with your lipids. That's okay. It's nowhere near as bad as something like Winstrol. But what's really interesting about Anavar is that you can run this at pretty low doses for a significant period of time. Now, I know people, male competitors who have run it at low doses. I'm talking 2.5, 5 milligrams a day just for kind of the finishing effect that it can, convey, onto a physique and onto strength. And I mean, it's again much less toxic to run than pretty much any other oral on this list. It's also really, really good at providing that sort of shredded look. One thing that I have to dispel about a myth, I'll get guys who come in here that look like they're carrying like a frickin' weight vest around them and just fat, and they're like, yeah, bro, can you give me an Anavar script, so I can get shredded? Like, the Anavar will not get you shredded. Nope. Okay, what gets you shredded? A freaking calorie deficit.
True.
Okay? We can talk about the GLP-1s and all of.
God damn, Alex Tatum is so fucking based. I love this guy. The whole reason that Tren and Halo and Superdraw are all ending up in like C tier is because Anavar exists. I have run Anavar so many months, about 9 months this year. I just started it back up. And yeah, within 3 days, especially being in a calorie deficit right now, running my GLP-1, everything just pops. When I was off it for 2 months to let my HDL rebound, getting blood work done in the morning, I definitely didn't feel like I was looking bad just being on straight TRT. But as soon as I was on the calorie deficit, I'm like, oh man, I'm starting to look kind of flat. I threw 10 milligrams of Anavar on there and I was like, oh shit, things are popping. And immediately just some of the enjoyment of being under heavy squats comes back, even in a calorie deficit. I fucking love Anavar. It's probably it is my favorite oral, bar none, S tier. I don't, even if Turinabol or Winstrol or Halo or Superdraw or Tren drive more strength, none of them are as lightweight as far as not neurotoxic, or at least like negligibly neurotoxic, easy on the lipids. You can run it for extended periods of time. You could train on it. The only downside to Anavar as it relates to rock climbing, and I've talked about this with multiple other climbers now, is low dose. In my opinion, this is an S tier compound, but at higher doses, 20 milligram plus, the pumps on it can be really, really problematic. Either back pumps or chest pumps or forearm pumps. It's very easy to get pumped out on excess Anavar. So for low dose Anavar, my goat, man. Outside of test and growth hormone, this is my number one. I fucking love this drug. But again, at low doses. At low doses, you can train on it, or I train on this and I run this for basically forever. On high doses, which is what a lot of bodybuilders will try to push you in that direction of, I think it's just, it has diminishing returns in my eyes above 20 milligrams, S tier.
All of that, later on, this helps maintain muscle mass that you have already accrued while you are in a caloric deficit. And so I absolutely love Anavar. I think it's a fantastic compound. It is one that is still available for prescription here in the United States. Has to be.
That's not true, actually, but maybe some compounding pharmacies are willing to do some shit under the table. Also, I did a video on how your Anavar is probably fake. It's the most underdosed compound that I have seen on the underground, so be mindful, friends.
Made by a compounding pharmacy. The generic form, can't get it from CVS or Walgreens anymore. There's some legal history there. But this is absolute goated, S tier, one of the best compounds to ever be made.
Safe enough to give to women or kids. Don't take it, women or kids. My usual disclaimers of take it in excess doses, you can potentially transition and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, S tier for sure.
S tier. Now, moving on, we've got Primobolan, aka Primo. This is going to be a really potent injectable DHT derivative that is primarily used as more of a finishing compound. This is something that is going to be used during cut phases, primarily for physique purposes, to try and help guys get that really shredded, granular look to their physique.
I actually disagree. Usually Primobolan tends to be deployed as a mechanism of controlling estradiol and adding additional anabolics that aren't testosterone. So when you take testosterone exogenously, your estrogen is going to rise to meet it. And the higher your test goes, the higher your estrogen is going to go, which then you could get bloating, gyno, shit like that. So in order to control your E2, you can either take an AI, you can use like serum-like measures with Masteron, which we're going to talk about in a bit, or you can throw in Primobolan. And the cool part about both Primo and Mast is they're relatively safe. You're still going to get the dyslipidemia. They're not hair-safe compounds. You could potentially lose hair really quickly. because they're DHT derivatives or dihydrotestosterone derivatives, but they're not bloat heavy compounds, and you can drive additional androgens without having to add more testosterone. That's why people really like Primo. If you're not pinning that much, it's pretty manageable. If you start raising those doses, it'll hurt like a motherfucker. It's synonymous with post-injection pain. But fuck, man, throw that in there in the syringe with a little bit of testosterone and at low doses. Primo is fucking Primo. It's probably the most benign injectable outside of growth hormone or test.
This is not something that you're ever going to see in someone who's trying to put on size. It's just not super effective.
Not true.
For that. I've had one or two people that I know and have worked with who have used primobolan unconventionally in those settings. If they have other, complicating factors, we can talk about that. But really, this is something that is going to be part of a stack when someone is shredding and they're in that significant caloric deficit and they're trying to maintain everything they previously gained. Yep.
But again, a compound that I've ran, so in the context that he's talking about, where you're just using additional anabolics for muscle retention, I've ran Mastron for this very, very reason, where I'm in deep caloric deficits. I'm trying to hold on to muscle with additional anabolics while being in a deep deficit and still holding on to performance, so that this way I could drop 5, 10, 15 pounds in 6 weeks and then peak for a climb. And I've been able to shoot up 2 grades doing that. I did that on Mastron. I think Mastron is an A tier. I think Primobolan is also an A tier compound for that reason. Either you can run it to get additional size in the off season, even though it's not as anabolic as a 19 Nor or a Equipoise, but I think that's really to our benefit. If you're trying to drive size for ballistic strength, I think Primo or Mast are both A tier, to be honest.
Primo as a DHT derivative, it is going to be a risk to your hairline. That's something you have to keep in mind. And
that's for both Primo and Mastron. They're both dihydrotestosterone derivatives.
Taking finasteride isn't going to help you, right? Because it's going to bind directly to that DHT receptor. So you're talking about having to add in like topical RU or something like that. That's actually a androgen receptor blocker if you're going to try and survive this. It's not particularly as bad for hair for most people as something like Masteron. And unfortunately, much like Anavar, this is one of the most counterfeited compounds around. But
oh yeah, he's actually super spot on about that. Both Primobolan and Mastron are super counterfeited right now in particular, because there's a huge raw shortage issue from China. Basically, 5 of the 6 manufacturers that do the raws have been arrested and shut down. So in the event that you think you have Primo or Mastron right now, you probably have testosterone or EQ. So good times. I don't know how much better or worse as far as hair safety Primo or Mast are. He's right about needing a topical if you are running them, and taking oral finasteride isn't going to help because both of them are going to bind to the DHT receptor. But as per usual, Dr. Alex, pretty spot on there. I do like both of these compounds for climbing. I know some folks prefer Mast over Primo. Other people prefer Primo over Mast. Primo is the next compound that I will be introducing probably at the beginning of January, because I need to add some more strength to my legs so that I could jump higher.
Primobolan, this is excellent. This is an incredible compound. It is absolute S tier for me.
A tier.
Oh, baby. Time for oxymethylone, aka A-bombs. So oxymethylone was developed, again, for trying to increase red blood cell counts in patients, and it's very, very good at that. Known as Anadrol, it has, quickly, amassed a kind of, cult-like following for the increases in strength, and not just increases in strength over the course of several weeks, but acutely. This causes some serious nervous system activation and allows people to increase their PRs, by, several percentage points, 5, 10% acutely with, a dose of Anadrol. Now, the challenge is that it doesn't necessarily work for everyone, right? I've worked with a lot of guys who have been unimpressed with what they've seen from oxymethylone, but get more of a strength boost from something like T-ball or D-ball. But the real problem is that this is really hepatotoxic. It's not as bad as something like Superdrol, if you look at the number of case reports that are out.
The other issue is it's a really bloat-heavy compound. In general, with Anadrol, water weight is largely associated. The other part is, at a certain point, I think a lot of folks anecdotally say in the gym, you'll move weight like a fucking god, and then you'll feel like shit because of the hepatotoxicity. So I don't think it's a great compound for climbers. It's like if we were having a conversation about best strength compounds for strongman or for arm wrestling, this could be an S tier compound for sure. This and Superdrol all day, every day. I have heard folks, and I have friends even in the Discord, that kind of equate YK11 to a drier version of Anadrol, and they swear by it. I need to see more data before I can approve anything SARM related. But of all the SARMs, that and Osterine are the ones that I'm most interested in. I'm not super interested in Osterine. I'm just going to sort of skip ahead a little bit because, yeah, Anadrol is probably high C tier. I will put it right above Superdrol. And let's just jump straight into growth hormone because I don't think we need to, I don't think we need to talk any more about a compound that's probably not worth running.
Is that, what's important to putting on size is not just muscle hypertrophy, but also muscle hyperplasia. So the majority of size that you will accumulate while on androgens, while working out in the gym, even as a natural, is mostly muscle hypertrophy, which is enlargement of the individual muscle cells. But when you're really trying to push things, you're trying to go even farther, you look for hyperplasia, which is actually the development of new muscle cells. And growth hormone is one of the few things that can actually achieve that. And so it can happen, through the growth hormone that you will secrete naturally, okay? Or you can straight up pin it. As it became, available in, the late 80s, early 90s, it was available before then, not in a recombinant form, but actually in a form from cadavers, but people actually got mad cow disease from that in Great Britain. It was a whole thing.
Fun times.
So things did not really come onto the scene in the world of bodybuilding, until the recombinant version hit the market. And so growth hormone is incredibly, incredibly potent. But the challenge with growth hormone is that it's not as easy as just, pinning your test and, just white knuckling it through your cycle. Growth hormone requires a strategy because whenever you start to dose growth hormone, you're going to have changes in insulin sensitivity, which can put you at risk for, developing things like, diabetes. It's a problem.
So in the Lattice video, I almost had a fucking hissy fit. Someone in the comments was like, I'm a medical professional and I really have issues with when he's using this medical terminology and saying things like growth hormone could raise your A1C. That causes diabetes. Exactly what I'm telling you. And, I hate it when doctors don't know their shit. Dr. Alex, thank you for calling it like it is. You have to manage your A1C when you're on growth hormone. And the reason for that is growth hormone itself doesn't drive the hyperplasia on its own and doesn't drive the collagen synthesis. It's largely done through IGF-1. Growth hormone raises your IGF-1 signaling, which is what helps with the nutrient absorption, which helps the collagen synthesis and that cascading processes. So yeah, growth hormone is dope. Growth hormone also drives water retention. Growth hormone is not a compound you want to run when peaking for a climb. Growth hormone is an off-season compound. I have been running Retta all week, and as I've introduced growth hormone, I have watched myself get leaner and myself growing on the scale despite being in a calorie deficit. I am not gaining muscle or anything. This is just water retention. The water retention on growth hormone, even at low doses, is real. However, there is no other compound, listen to me, no other compound builds tendon integrity like growth hormone. You cannot pin growth hormone and get stronger fingers. You need to train. But growth hormone plus finger stimulus is the fastest way to get super physiological results to tendon health. That's it. And for that reason, growth hormone is S tier. Would any self-respecting comp climber run this into a competition? No. You could come off the growth hormone and be, 3 to 7 pounds lighter on the day. Why would you run growth in a competition? On the other hand, if all I'm getting is piss tested and there have been 0 failures for piss tests on growth hormone. 0. Yeah, that's probably the best way to support finger strength in an off season, just knowing that your strength to weight ratio is going to change as you drop weight when you come off 2 weeks prior. Growth hormone's dope. Do you have to manage your A1C? Yes. Is it associated with cardiac issues if you run it chronically for years at a clip? Yes. Can you attenuate some of that through fasted cardio? Yes. Do you need to manage the dyslipidemia from growth hormone? Yes. This is not a free compound. A lot of responsibility is required with it. But it's bioidentical, safe for both men and women, drives collagen synthesis and proper tendon structure better than literally anything fucking else. I have a 20-minute deep dive on growth hormone. It's difficult to deal with the edema. It's a balancing act. I have a love-hate relationship with growth hormone. I think this time I'm going to run it as high as I could tolerate it. If I could tolerate 3 IUs a night, that's what I'm going to do. If it's going to be 2 IUs a night, it's going to be 2. I'd rather run some than none. That's kind of the plan on this bulk cycle. But yeah, growth hormone. easy fucking S tier compound. I think that's fair. Let's listen to Dr. Alex, then we'll wrap it up.
Issues when it comes to accumulating fluid in joint spaces. And so athletes will often develop carpal tunnel. And so they will be in the gym working out and they'll just drop their dumbbells because they can't hold on. They actually will have a temporary paralysis or a palsy.
The finger numbness I would wake up with on growth hormone sucks so fucking bad. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's not fun. There are times where I just could not fully close my fist. It sucks. I cannot just ramp growth hormone for that reason.
The nerve in the wrist, because they've got so much, fluid in the joint space. And, if we're talking about, what sort of doses cause that, I've seen that on as little as, 3 and 4 IUs a day, just depending.
God, how does he know? How does he know? Who is this guy? How does he know?
On how sensitive the person is to it. And so growth hormone often has to be paired due to issues with insulin sensitivity with insulin itself. That gets a whole lot more complicated if we're talking about risk.
Don't do that, please, for the love of God. Just cut your carbs or stop growth hormone.
That is something that will take you out if you don't manage exceedingly closely. Using insulin as an anabolic agent is playing with fire. But peanut butter and jelly, it tends to follow with growth hormone administration for most athletes. But again, growth hormone can allow for hyperplasia. And there's been a lot of suspicion about whether or not growth hormone was responsible for, Palumboism, the enlarged bellies that we started to see in like the 80s mass monster, phase. And, Dave Palumbo's been interviewed himself on this. He's one of the first guys to really experiment with growth hormone and with insulin. It's not exactly clear if that's exactly what does it.
It's part of it, but it's not just running growth hormone. It's running growth hormone with excessive carbs and excessive food. That's really what tends to cause Palumboism.
Due to the complexities involved in this, although I love growth hormone as a compound, and I think it's really, really interesting as an option for hypertrophy beyond really truthfully competitive bodybuilders or very high level strength athletes, powerlifters. I would say growth hormone, if we're looking at it just as a purely anabolic agent, this is going to be probably B tier for most.
I kind of disagree, only because of the safety profile. It's bioidentical in doses around 3 to 4 IUs. It's pretty benign. As far as acute anabolic effect, it's not going to drive the same mass that an EQ or a DECA or something like that would. But it's also way more tolerable than, or at least it's way more or less deleterious than the other ones too.
Recreational users. All right, so that is our steroid tier list. As a quick disclaimer, again, this is all for fun. As I encourage everybody, don't take drugs unless they're prescribed to you, and then you should probably take those drugs.
I completely agree with Dr. Alex. Don't take drugs. Don't take these drugs. Don't take any drugs unless prescribed to you by a doctor. Obviously, this is for fun. This is my tier list. It's probably not going to be your tier list. It's not even Dr. Alex's tier list. We have very different opinions on what's S, what's trash tier, and everything else. But please support Dr. Alex. Don't do drugs. This is really just like a fun exercise for all of us as climbers and drug enthusiasts and steroid enthusiasts. And if you have any experience with any of these compounds, if you have an issue with my tier list, if there are things that you say, Adam, I need you to test X, Y, or Z for blah, 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 cool. Let me know in the comments below. I really, really appreciate that. As always, thank you guys so much for everyone that joined the channel this week. It's been super, super cool. Shout out to everyone that's sent really kind words this week. It's meant the world to me. I really appreciate it. Obviously, a lot of work is going to be required over the next 11 months for me to try to send Rainbow Rocket. Got to get a lot stronger. But I appreciate you guys sticking around for the ride, sticking around for the science. I'm going to be doing some other tier lists coming up. There's going to be a fat burner tier list. There's going to be a peptide tier list. There are so many new peptides. I'm going to start doing some more research streams. So if there are some peptides you want me to research, please drop those in the comments below as well. As always, though, I am Adam with Anabolic Climbing. Wishing you guys, as always, good luck, happy sending. Appreciate you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.